Hello class, how have you been? Now we will be discussing in physical science our next lesson, which is all about polarity and intermolecular forces of attraction. Most atoms that exist only by themselves are less stable compared to when they are bonded with other atoms in a compound. By combining with each other through chemical bonds, the atoms become actually more stable. That is why atoms combine so that they become stable if they are not. So chemical bond is an electrical attraction between the nuclear and valence electrons of an atom and which binds atoms together. This attraction is usually known as intermolecular forces. When you want to measure the tendency of an atom to attract electrons towards itself, that is what we call electronegativity. So there are actually three types of chemical bond. We have ionic, polar covalent bond, nonpolar covalent bond. Let us differentiate these three types of chemical bond. First, ionic bond. These are formed between a metal and a non-metal due to large difference in their electronegativities from the transfer of one or more valence electrons from one atom to another. An example is a chemical bond between sodium and chlorine. One electron from sodium combines with the atom of chlorine to form a stable compound. Next kind of chemical bond is what we call covalent bond. Covalent bonds are formed by sharing of electrons between non-metals. Ibig sabihin, in this bond, two non-metals are being bonded. These covalent bonds are classified into two. We have polar covalent bond and non-polar covalent bond. When you say non-polar covalent bond, this is a bond in which the electrons are equally shared by the bonded atoms. An example is the hydrogen gas molecule where the atoms are the same and the electrons are equally shared. Next, when you say polar covalent bond, these are the bond in which the bonded atoms have an unequal sharing of electrons. An example is the combination or the bond between iodine and chlorine in which it is polar because the electrons stay longer in the vicinity of the chlorine here than in the iodine. So that is why it is polar covalent bond. To distinguish polar from non-polar covalent bond, it is very important to know the difference between the electronegativity values of an atom. So the absolute value of the electronegativity difference between the atoms gives an idea of the type of chemical bond that exists between them. So if you will get the difference between the electronegativity of an atom, if it is greater than or equal to 2, that would tell us that it is an anionic bond. If the electronegativity between the atom is between 0.5 and 2.0, that is polar covalent bond. However, if the electronegativity difference between two atoms is less than 0.5, we can say that it is a non-polar covalent bond. To identify the electronegativities of an element, just look at your periodic table and underneath the symbol of your element, that signifies the electronegativities of an element. Okay, example, if we are to get the bond between sodium and chlorine, we just have to get its electronegativity difference by getting the difference, the absolute value of the difference between the first atom minus the second atom. In this case, our first atom is sodium. And we know that sodium has an electronegativity from your periodic table of elements that is equal to 0.9. And chlorine has a 3.0 electronegativity. So we will just get the difference between this. That is an absolute value kahit saan ang mauna because it is an absolute value, the answer would always be positive. So we'll say that our first atom electronegativity is 3.0 minus 0.9, and we will get 2.1. And this is our electronegativity difference. Because this is 2.1, let's go back to the rule. So since it is greater than 2.0, we can say that the bond between sodium and chlorine is an ionic bond. Okay, by following the process I have shown you earlier, by getting the electronegativity difference of the two atoms have undergone a chemical bond, you would identify the type of chemical bond that is present between them. For example, sodium and chlorine, that is an ionic bond because that is greater than 2.0. For iodine and chlorine, that is a polar bond because you have an electronegativity of 0.5. For two hydrogen atoms, they have the same electronegativities, so therefore you'll get 0, so that is a nonpolar covalent bond. Intermolecular forces of attraction is actually an attractive or repulsive hold molecules that hold molecules together. This explains why substances exist as solids, liquids, or gases at room temperature. So there are intermolecular forces of attraction for interactions involving covalent molecules. We have four. We have dipole-dipole forces, ion-dipole forces, dispersion forces, and hydrogen bond. What are the difference between this? So in dispersion, all molecules, especially non-polar molecules, these are the interacting particles. For dipole-dipole, these are polar molecules. For ion-dipole, we have ions and polar molecules. For ion-ion, we have ions. It can either be cations or anions. The hydrogen bond, it can be a bond between nitrogen and hydrogen atom, oxygen with hydrogen atom, or a fluorine with a hydrogen atom. So it is very important that we know all these things so that we will be able to identify why does chemical bonds occur. So that's it for this video. I hope that you have learned something. See you again. Bye.